Hi and welcome back. We're on to part 3 of our series where we're installing a V8 into an MX5. So far we've done the potentially daunting job of wiring up our donor engine, as well as the relatively straightforward tasks of pulling out both engines and stripping the MX5 engine bay. So now that we have some space in our engine bay, we can really start to see what we're dealing with. The engine will sit surprisingly well in between these two chassis rails, but there is a little bit of fabrication involved still. These tabs on the inner edge of the chassis rails need to be trimmed back and then seam welded. The chassis rails are this shape because of a result of the way they're manufactured and then spot welded. However, by trimming and seam welding, what we're going to end up with is actually a stronger join. When you're welding, remember to do it in short bursts. The metalwork in the chassis legs is reasonably beefy, but pausing in between bursts and alternating between sides will reduce the chances of any distortion. I'll also be using a wet rag to cool areas and allow me to progress more quickly. The most significant work is going to be up here on this shelf that's formed by the bracing in between the bulkhead and the chassis rails. We're going to remove this to provide space for our new engine to sit as far back as possible, but because it provides strengthening, we'll have to replace it with some gusseting. I've also marked up where I'm going to cut in advance. Investing a little bit of time now is going to save making mistakes later. Now some of it's tricky to get to, and it'll be a combination of tools that get us the best results. I'll be using this small angle grinder with a 0.8mm thick disc. It's very thin and it cuts through nicely without making too much mess. I'll also be using my reciprocating saw, which is one of my favourite tools. It's fairly brutal, but it's got a good long blade on it which enables you to make plunge cuts and gets difficult to access places. I'll also be using 2 grinders, one with a normal grinding disc on it and then also one with a wire brush for tidying up afterwards. Now before you start, apply some common sense. Where are the fuel lines? Are they properly sealed? I pulled mine right out of the way under the car. So gloves, goggles, a bit of common sense, and we'll get on with the task at hand. So after all that, our engine bay is ready to squeeze in a V8. This really is about as serious as the chassis modification gets. Depending on your choice of gearbox, you may have a little bit of work to do to weld plates into the tunnel, but we'll get onto those choices in due course. Right now I'm going to finish clearing up in here and get some primer onto the welds. The next time I see you, I'll be looking at solutions for the subframe and anti-roll bar, and some of the products that Plus 4 Engineering can supply to make those jobs easier. Until then, remember to follow us on the Plus 4 Engineering website. You'll also find us on Twitter, Facebook and on YouTube. And finally, check out the Caterham Academy. We're entering a car next year which arrives very soon. Check up on us for build progress of the Plus 4 Engineering Caterham 7 when it arrives. I'll be blogging the progress in detail on blatters.com with the username Plus4E. Can it be built in a weekend? That is the challenge.